Hi. Could we all take our seats, please, or get comfortable wherever we want to be for the conference? So, just to get us started, welcome to the 2019 Ladder Association Conference. I'd like to thank everybody in the room for taking the time out to attend and give us your valuable time. During the day, we have a number of very informative speakers, and we'll have interactive discussion around what's being discussed. And it's all things that can affect our industry going forward. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for giving their time. It's very much appreciated. We know you're all very busy people, but I think we will all benefit from the knowledge that you impart. Before we really start the whole event, I'd like just to bring to everybody's attention that somebody who works for the association and is very much part of the access industry has been awarded an OBE. So our secretary, Peter Bennett, I think we all know Peter, works tirelessly to make working with ladders and access equipment safer for everybody in the industry. That's been recognised by him being awarded an OBE, so I'd like everybody to put their hands together to congratulate Peter. That's all you're getting from me today because there's a lot to get through. I hope you enjoy the day. I hope you take knowledge from it, and please enjoy. Thank you.
I hope you have all downloaded the app for the conference. Jason's going to explain to you some of the interaction and some of the functionality of the app that we'll be using today. Jason.
Hello. So this is a first for us, this event. Hopefully everybody should have received an email with an invitation to download an app on either iTunes or Google Play. I'm kind of hesitant about doing this, but can I have a show of hands if anybody hasn't downloaded the app so far? We can invite people to ask questions either by using the microphone or interactive through the app. So if you've downloaded the app and you have already logged in, you should be able to see the screen on the right there, which has a number of functions, one of which is a live Q&A button. For this event now, that Q&A, thank you, my glamorous assistant is showing, the Q&A is now enabled. So as we go through this session, if you have any questions, you can put them into the app and they will appear as a live feed on the screen behind. So as we go through, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in and we will then invite them to be answered by the speakers or as part of the debate as we go through. I appreciate this is the first time we've used it in a session and hopefully you will get something out of this as another feature of the conference. Thank you.
So our first session this morning is EN131, our next steps. That will be delivered by Don Aers, who's, as you know, Technical Manager of the Ladder Association. And Don will be accompanied by Alex Farnhill. Alex is one of Her Majesty's Inspectors of Health and Safety, a policy advisor in the HSE's safety unit, leading on product directives for roller, lifts, earth-moving machinery, working at height, including ladders. A large focus for Alec is developing policy and supporting the development of guidance to continue to improve safety standards in industry, and he is the HSE's representative at EU ADCO's, representing UK's interests, including market surveillance, to improve safety standards. Apparently ADCO is the Admin Cooperation Groups on Market Surveillance. I give you now Don and Alec.
Today is an emotional day for me. No, I'm not leaving. It's precisely 2 months and 28 days since the transition period to EN131 ended. I said it's ended. The transition has happened. So BS EN131 parts 1 and 2, that transition period is now over. So let's look at what we have. The current status of EN131. Part 1, 2015, published. Part 2, 2017, published. Part 3, markings and user instructions, published. Part 4, currently under revision, but let's hope, fingers crossed, soon be published. Part 5, accessories, it's now been agreed that that work can start after all these years. They've actually decided that it's going to start. It will be under French convenership, and the work on that will be commencing, should be, by the end of this year. Part 6, telescopic ladders. It's published in its latest form, in its revised form now. It's just come out this month. So it's out there, and that includes the base width dimension B2 to be wider for telescopic ladders. It's now out. Part 7, we're not going to do anything with that. That's staying the same. But that was published 2013, so that's mobile ladders with platforms, warehouse steps, as you may know them, or ladders with a platform which has side protection around it. And part 8, ladders with a separate platform, that's now completed its first draft, that's going out, so that's ladders with a separate platform across, so it's out there. That's the status as we are at the moment. So what's changed? First of all, dimensions to improve stability. There are new requirements where the base of a ladder has to be wider than the top, thus making the ladder more stable. It's a visual thing. You don't have to test it to know that it's more stable, because when you look at it, you can see it's more stable because it's wider at the bottom than at the top. And that, I think, is an important thing, that it's a visual thing. There are new testing standards in there, new requirements. There are professional and non-professional classes. And obviously in the workplace, you'd be looking to use ladders that met the professional class. The difference is not about the weight that the ladder will hold. And I'll say this again, I've said it before. When you go home at night, you don't get lighter, do you? You don't suddenly magically become a lighter person. So why, as is in the past, should a ladder that you use at home bear a lesser weight than one that you use in the workplace? You stay the same. So the new requirements are based on durability, how tough that ladder is, how long it will last. And there are new marking requirements. You have to give a lot more information. The information has to be in a way that is clearly understood. So the information has to be based on recognised ISO symbols. And you have to provide information about safety as well with the ladder. That has to accompany the ladder. Some amazing changes. They've taken a long time, but they're all there now. So, we talked about some of the requirements. There is a new test in the position of use, where a load is applied in the position of use. Up to now, there have been theoretical tests about how you load a ladder, and they were all very interesting, but now they're actually loading a ladder as it is used for the first time ever. That's a big step forward. There are requirements for how slip resistant the feet of a ladder are. There are requirements for how much a ladder twists when you use it. And the last one on there are requirements for the durability. Fatigue tests for standing ladders, and for leaning ladders, there are fatigue loading tests. And I talked about B2. And this is the elephant in the room for some people. B2, the minimum permanently available base width for leaning rung ladders is derived from a formula for B2. And if you use the B2 formula, basically the base of the ladder is wider than the top, a pyramid. Is that more stable than a ladder where the base isn't wider? Yes, it is. Most kids could work that one out. Pyramids work like that. Most things that are wider at the base than the top are more stable. And it says, and I want to point out a couple of words here, it shall be permanently incorporated in the design, not allowed by a removable component a removable component, so one that you can take off and lose. It has to be permanently attached, and you can't provide it by an accessory, something that you add on later. It has to be in the design and permanently available. It is permissible to allow for the base B2 or its dimensions to be adjusted by the user. It doesn't have to be fixed. Now, how many people think that a stabiliser is a fixed bar like that, or sorry, the method of B2 is like that, a fixed bar across the base of the ladder? There's nothing in the standard that says that. Nothing at all. Doesn't tell you how you achieve the bigger base width. It's not necessarily a bar across the base of the ladder. It just has to be wider at the base. And down there, I'm really enthused to find, when I was looking for pictures of this, a telescopic ladder with a wider base. Fantastic. Because the standard for telescopic ladders now says B2, the base has to be wider in the same way. So that's what it says in the standard. How you achieve it, it's up to you, but it has to be there. The other thing that is now, that has just happened, is that in EN131, they have revised the definition of a ladder for a specific professional use. It used to be fire brigade ladders or ladders with big wheels that you wheeled up to the job. There was no real definition, but there is now going to be, and this is going to be an amendment to Part 1, a very tight definition of what is a ladder for a specific professional use. And this was put forward by the UK with the HSE's assistance, and it is a portable ladder which by their design and instruction are intended and limited only for specific professional use. They're not for general professional or non-professional use. And the key words are by design, by instruction, and limited. In other words, you can't use it for general use. Something in the design stops it being used. And finally, obviously what this means, as we've said before, is that British standards, BS 2037, BS 1129, they are in conflict with the EN131 standard and they have been withdrawn. There is currently a working group and they've now completed the first draft of a standard which will replace the trestles and stagings content, and it's probable that there will be one new standard that covers trestles and stagings, and that will have requirements for staging on a trestle, and it will have requirements for the side protection on a trestle, but it will be a new standard that covers both timber and aluminium, which were previously in separate standards. But they are withdrawn. All the things about ladders in those standards, that's gone. So that's the new part. That's what 2037 and 1129, I'm calling it that. It will probably have a new number. That's just being finalised at the moment. But it will have all that in a single requirement. And I said today is an emotional day because that date up there has passed. And in our guidance that we put out, we said the revised EN131 standards are now published and manufacturers are in the process of changing to new designs. This was in the guidance that was put out at the time. Ladders certified to 2037 and 1129 will no longer be available after a transition period. And that period, you can see it on there, 31st of the 12th, 2018. The date has passed. So what are we going to do next? What do manufacturers have to do now? What do suppliers have to do now? And Alex, I'd like to...
Is that me?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's you.
thank you.
Sorry. This
Yeah,
is your
okay.
bit.
Yep.
This is where Alex comes in, and we're going to talk about what people should be doing, in your view?
Yep, okay, no problem at all. Thanks for having me again. I'm here a bit after this presentation as well, so if people want to have a chat on the sidelines, I'm able to do that. So obviously, the previous standard of manufacturing ladders is now gone. However, there will be, as it says in the leaflet, stock of existing ladders. So those will wind down as people purchase them. But when you come to replace your ladders at some stage, the expectation is that you will then replace it with the new standard ladder. The manufacturers should not be producing the old standard, they should be producing ladders to the new standard. In relation to sort of standards making process, it's not an exclusive small circle, it's quite an inclusive circle. So over the past 15 years, we've consulted very widely among industry, among users, among associations, and among manufacturers to try and design new products that are safer for the users. So that's why this has been put in place. It's taken a long time to get here. Part of my role is to engage with our other European manufacturers and standards making bodies to make sure that the UK is represented with their views. So moving forward, as we want to make improvements or changes, then we need to engage with the HSE, with the Ladder Association, to put those views across to us so we can represent them to the standards making bodies across Europe. A little bit on Brexit. Even though we are leaving Europe in some form or another, the standards making bodies that produce EN131 are still going to be working with the UK BSI standard making bodies to make sure they're aligned. That's because the UK is very well respected across Europe for its technical abilities in manufacturing ladders and producing standards for ladders, as well as other pieces of equipment, and they don't want to lose that resource. Generally speaking, we contribute a hell of a lot to the standard making process, a lot more than a lot of other European nations do. So please don't think because we will be leaving that we are not going to be contributing towards standard making process in future, because we will be doing. Anything else on that?
I'm going to ask interesting question that some people have been thinking about. Is that the date has passed, the transition date that we set.
Yep.
If someone comes into my shop or into my, I'm a manufacturer, someone comes into my office and says, I'd like a ladder, but I don't want it to the new EN131 standard. I want it as it used to be.
Okay.
What would be your position on that?
My position is that you need to supply products that are safe, and one way of proving safety is designing and manufacturing your products to the latest standard that's available once the transition period is finished. The transition period is there for a good reason, so it allows manufacturers to make adaptations to their production processes in good time so that they can start supplying the new product to the correct standard, and that's across all pieces of kit, not just ladders. So if you as a manufacturer, wherever you are in the world, decide to supply a product that is not to the standard, is potentially an unsafe product. And as a result, if a competitor reports that manufacturer to the HSE is therefore duty bound to investigate and take action to determine whether it is in fact a safe product or not. And again, the way to prove safety is to design to the new standard.
And so manufacturers need to be aware of that, obviously, and to think about if people are coming to them and saying, we don't want this standard, we don't need it, or something like that. They need to think about that in terms of the supply of those products to that.
Yep, because potentially you're taking a conscious decision to supply products on the market that are potentially not safe, and therefore, you're at risk of being investigated by the HSE. The HSE has a product safety team that's across the whole country. They have inspectors from the whole of the UK who are dedicated to investigating unsafe products that are supplied. Now, they could be supplied from manufacturers within the UK, or they could be from the European Union, or wider afield from China or America. If we hear about equipment or kit that is deemed not to be safe to the right standard, then we will investigate it and take appropriate action against either the people that are bringing it into the country or the manufacturers if they're based here or their representatives.
I think that's a very important point, that this isn't just about manufacturers, it's about people who buy in ladders and source ladders out, and that may be manufacturers, it may be people who buy ladders direct, it may be big supermarkets, it may be big stockists who buy ladders, and if they don't meet the standard, the fact is they're importing products, and obviously after Brexit there are all potential changes, but a person who is maybe a dealer is now a importer, and again that puts extra onus on that person to make sure that the products are safe. Is that correct?
Yeah, ultimately you're duty bound to supply products that are safe on the market. If we find out that that's not the case, then we will investigate appropriately.
Okay. So I think the next step, obviously, we're starting the audit process. We'll be looking in terms of people's membership, that they only supply, as it says in the requirements, products that meet the standard. But there is an obligation over and above what we require as membership to make sure that products now meet that new standard. We have got, I don't know, have we got any questions come up? No, not at the moment. Okay, so questions from the floor.
So, as far as responsibility goes, if, say, a business phones up and orders a ladder, as someone said, I need a new ladder for this purpose, and it comes down, is it the responsibility of who supplies the ladder to ensure it's a new standard, or does the person buying it have to ensure that they are buying the right product? And in the case of an incident, where does the responsibility lie, or is it with both?
It's potentially both, but the majority of the responsibility is on the supplier of the kit. They should be aware of the law and the standards where to supply that kit, and it's any kit, not just ladders.
Thank you. Anyone else got any more questions? Question from the back. Jeff, wait a minute.
A question really for the Ladder Association itself, with regards allowing time for the old standards to be sold off. Have we got any time frame where we're going to make it mandatory for centres to only have equipment used on the courses to the new product standards?
I think in terms of training on equipment, that's a very good question. Is that what should we be expecting training centres to have? Alex, you've got a view on that. Training centre, so a training centre that's training someone in the use of a ladder.
Yep.
They've got a ladder which meets the old standards. Should they be thinking about changing that to a ladder that meets the new standard for training purposes?
Well, I'm potentially looking at both. I mean, I'm quite forward thinking. I'd be saying, well, why don't you just focus on the new ladder, because that's the one that's going to be on the market soon. They're being manufactured. The transition period is finished. If you want to go to the store now to buy a new ladder, it should be to the new standard. So if you're starting to train people tomorrow, then I'd be encouraging you to focus on the new design of ladders so that they're fully aware. If you train them on the old ladder and then they go out and start working on a job or they transfer a company and then they have the new ladder, do they need to go through the training again? Or should they, if they've already been trained on the new ladder, then they're covered to do that?
I suppose in training terms, if there are features on that ladder that you should make someone aware of in their training, then actually the only way you could do that is to have a ladder that met the new standard. So that does make sense, that you would start to think about, for training centres, that they have equipment which meets the latest standard. So when they're training people in what to look for.
Okay then, we just need some clarification then from the association with the introduction of the new training course line. You are recommending that we should have examples of the previous standard and the new standard because they could be using the old standard for a number of years, but also make them aware of the features of the new standard ladders as well. So if this is a requirement for the training, I think that needs to obviously go out to all the training centres and some advice and guidance and that to make sure that they have both present. I mean, it does restrict some possible training on customer sites, as an example, unless we're carrying the new standard ladders with us. It would probably restrict that training on other people's sites. It's something for the association to look at, isn't it, really, and sort of give the training provider some guidance on what your expectations are for that qualification, isn't it?
And I think we'd invite the training committee to think about that one, and I'll be talking to Chris about that, and we'll take that one forward.
When you say that the new standard is going to be with the markings and durability of the ladder between unprofessional and professional, is the manufacturers going to be making the stickers or embossing the ladder with the new EN131 standard, or are they still going to stick to a sticker the same size as my thumbnail?
There are new the requirements for marking have changed with Part 3. And one of the things that you have to mark the ladder is if it's for professional or non-professional use. So there's a symbol, no, I don't have it. There's a symbol for a professional ladder, which is a guy with a hard hat standing in front of a factory. And the symbol, this is how ISO works, and I don't apologise for it. The symbol for a non-professional ladder is a man without a hard hat standing in front of a house. But it has to be marked with the symbol which defines a professional or a non-professional ladder. And obviously, in terms of the workplace, I guess you'd be saying we're looking for ladders that have got the professional classification.
Yes.
And that would include in training centres, because in effect, when you're training, you're at work, so you would be using professional ladders.
But they can still be the size of my thumbnail and come off in
They
6
have to
weeks.
be a minimum. There are six critical symbols, and there are sizes for those symbols. They have to be a minimum of 15 by 15 millimetres, so they're bigger now than they were, and they have to look exactly the same. This is what it must look like, and that's now been agreed by ISO.
I have a specific question in relation to, we understand from some anecdotal evidence that there are some sectors who have produced a standard of their own, which creates a specification for ladders that do not comply with the standard. I'm just wondering what the HSE's view would be on such a thing.
The standard that you need to use is the one that's on the screen, which is EN131, until that changes. So producing your own standard doesn't really mean anything, in our view. If a particular industry is struggling with a new standard, they need to come and engage with us to outline what the issues are, what their requirements are, and why. We understand that when standards change, it can be difficult for manufacturers and industries to adapt to those, but they're not the only people in the UK that are struggling with new standards. As I said before, I work with the earth moving machinery business, and we've got a whole host of issues regarding visibility and quick couplers that are requiring those earth moving machines to be adapted. And it's been a real big effort over the last 5 years to try and get them on board to make changes to make sure those pieces of kit are safer for the operators that work close to them because of a historical incidents of fatal accidents. So they're not the only people out there to struggle to get to grips with new standards, but simply bypassing them and refusing to engage with us in relation to the standards and not applying them is not the way forward.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ali. I agree with what you're saying. What would the view of HSE be then for those manufacturers or suppliers who engaged with organisations who specify equipment that does not meet the standard?
As I said before, the manufacturers are duty bound to supply safe products on the market. If we hear of manufacturers that are producing, and one way of doing that is ensuring that they manufacture the new standard. If you're going to manufacture a piece of kit that's not to the new standard and supply it on the market, you're at risk of investigation by the HSE, potential prosecution for supply of that product.
I mean, this is it's Callum again from HS. This is more of a statement than a question, but in support of what you've said, being the HSE and the manufacturers' stimulation, their productivity, and that I am open to all manufacturers to supply us examples of the new standard ladders for all training members. Just an invite.
Okay, we got one more. Okay, one more. Yeah.
Okay. Question for Alex. On the slide we had up earlier, this standard does not apply to portable ladders, which by their design and instruction are intended and limited only for specific professional use. Okay. Who's going to determine the difference between specific use and general use? See, can I just add on that?
You would do it.
Sorry?
Go on.
You would do it.
Right.
As the manufacturer.
As a manufacturer of specialist kit, okay, who's going to determine whether that is for a specific use, or if you're also using it in general use, does that mean you've got to have two sets of ladders?
I would suggest that it would have to be that you would have to justify why you needed a ladder that was specific in designing that ladder and making it available. So if you made that available, you would have to justify the reason why you had to have or supply a specific ladder that didn't meet the requirements of the standard.
Who would we have to justify that to, Don?
You would have to justify that if anyone came to you and said, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So, well, let's take a step back. Where did... I've come in after this. So where did the requirement for that come in? Because I said before about a standards making process is it's representative of the manufacturers, the users, the industry bodies, feed into a process and everyone gets around the table and agrees the way forward. So that must have come from a specific requirement. I've dealt with things like this before. So where has that come from? Is it the fire brigade, or what specifically caused that to be added?
That was previously, there's always been something in there in the standard about specific professional use, and it mentioned two types of ladders for fire brigade use, because obviously they need to be, because of the loads that they are subject to, they need to be substantially different.
Yeah.
And it talked about ladders that were mobile, i.e. ladders that frankly you don't see in the UK but in Europe used to exist, which were ladders which were on big wheels that were for wheeling around on to gain access, and they were considered to be mobile ladders and were outside the scope of that standard. Up to now, though, there's been nothing in there which defines a ladder which is outside of the scope, because we can't say that there is never going to be a requirement for a ladder for a specific professional use, but what we can say is what it says, that by design and instructions are intended and limited only for that use. So you can't pick that ladder up. I think this is the issue. You can't pick that ladder up from its specific professional use and go and use it somewhere else just as a normal ladder. That means it's no longer being used for that specific professional use. So something has to limit it by design and instruction.
Does that answer your question, the kind of that background and...
No, not really. But
okay.
I'll tell you what,
listen, I understand how difficult it is for you guys at the moment, because we are where we are, okay? But the difference being, if you make a ladder, as we do, for a specific job, okay, but in having to do that job, they also have to access somewhere else that maybe not as specific, does that mean they're going to have two ladders? And if we make a ladder for a specific use under wording that you've got there, what standard is that going to be under?
That is a ladder for specific use. Is there a standard for every type of non-specific ladder? At this moment in Europe, they are now thinking, or they've started to group, which I'm not absolutely clear where it's going yet, for window cleaners ladders. Now, where that will go, I don't know. But that's a very good example of the thinking. Okay, so window cleaners are special, I'm not sure. Do they need a special ladder? I'm not sure. But that's just an example where it might go, but I can't say any more than that at this moment.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think if you've got more, Martin, we'll talk about it after. Brilliant. Unfortunately, Alex, have you got anything more to add?
No. Well, I would just say that we're here to engage with you. So if you find yourself potentially being approached by people who want to make non-specific products in your sector and you want some advice and guidance, speak to the Ladder Association or speak to ourselves, and then we can try and work our way through it.
Okay. I'd like to thank Alex for coming along today and helping out, and thank you for listening.